This short video is a video about man's inhumanity to man and atrocities being committed right across the world in the name of religion that is supposed to be representative of a loving God, a God to all faiths and none. And I take heart from the words of Dampada. Hate is not overcome by hate. Hate is overcome by love. And if God is love, then why in this generation are we allowing holy men and women, representatives of a loving God, to abuse God's children, not sexually, but to take their life from them? In the last few days, I have been incensed in my heart at the depravity to the depths that we as human beings will go to in order to appease the letter of God's law. A law that to me sucks. That's the only word I can think of. It's a word that is not in keeping with what I believe, that God is love and that we are called in loving service. But what has incensed me is this global protest from God's children to stop the Iranian authorities, the religious mullahs, from stoning a beautiful young woman to death. Her name is Sakina Mohammadi Ashianti. And I know that the global protest has spared her death by stoning. But what is so upsetting for all of us who live in a civilized world, that she could still be hanged. And equally disturbing is the thought that as I sit here in front of this camera in a peaceful environment, in the knowledge that I am loved, where there is no conflict in my life, I know that this beautiful young woman has been publicly shamed for no just reason. And she's joined by many other sisters who await a similar punishment by death, stoning by death, or hanging, by being accused unfairly by their partners. I put a request to you today that if you truly do believe in a loving God, that if you truly say that you worship Allah, Yahweh, a monotheistic God, if you are brothers and sisters who've given your heart to Buddha, and you observe the teachings of the Buddha, the Christ and Muhammad, as given to us in the holy writings, inspired by God's Spirit, then where do you find such language as this? That we have to take the life of an innocent to appease our ego. That is tantamount to open betrayal to a God of love. And I appeal to your heart, whoever you are, go back into your sacred space, release your ego, and return into your silence and ask your God, what is God saying to you? I doubt He's saying stone innocent people for the sake of upholding the letter of the law. However sacred that law is, it's an abomination in the eyes of God, and it's an abomination to Muhammad, and it's an abomination to Buddha. And I appeal to you to return to normality, to return to a heart infused and inspired by a loving God. But yet, as a Catholic Christian, I shoulder some worries and burdens, and have done for many years, at how my own church has been cruel and inhumane, and acting out of the mindset of God. For example, divorce. I had a dear friend that was one of my staff 20 years ago, and this member of staff was a very devout, God-fearing, law-abiding Christian. And she was a daily attendant at church, at Mass, and her life was centered around her Eucharist, the receiving of Christ into her soul. And her husband was found out in having an illicit affair. She was devastated, and she sought my advice. And because she was such a good Christian, Catholic Christian, she gave so much of her time and energy and her funding to support their local parish. She became great friends with the priest. And then when they found out in the church that her husband was having an affair and who divorced her, you guess what happened? The very family that was given to her by God to support her through her darkest hour turned their back on her. And that still happens today in Christian circles, that if a woman is divorced by her husband, or if she has to be divorced from her husband, there's very little mercy or compassion shown from the clerics who represent a loving God. And I appeal to them. I appeal to the Bishop of Rome, and I appeal to the Archbishops of York and Canterbury. I appeal to the Christian community at large to ask their heart, what is God saying to them? Judge not, that ye yourselves be not judged. But who am I, a lay monastic, to ask this of you, when you are more scholarly than I am, where you uphold the letter of the law? I'm sorry, I am not interested in the letter of the law. My heart is inspired to fly like an eagle's wings to the spirit of God's law, and that spirit has set me free from many years of religious oppression. And I took the words of the great Teresa of Avila to my heart. And she said, if you wish to fly into the arms of the beloved God, you have to come away from your religious family, and you have to begin that solitary journey and walk a simple journey of faith. Your church serves you well. It gives you the knowledge, the experience that you need. But the church has its rightful place, but not if it oppresses God's Spirit within you. So to the Iranian church, to the Iranian Muslims, to the Iranian mullahs, to the Iranian authorities, I would say this to you and the Muslim world. Ask yourself, what is God saying to your heart? And I know that He's not saying stone the innocent, because your ego and your pride are wounded. The teachings of Muhammad are teachings about love and service to a loving God, and you have made a mockery of God, as I have when I defied God. But today we must celebrate that all men and women should be free to honor a loving God, and we have responsibilities to a loving God, and that is to walk uprightly and speak our truth and love our neighbor as ourselves. Namaste.